Hi guys, so hopefully you listened to the intro so you know what I'm looking for in your images as far as your metadata and your histogram. Now for this critique, I'll be looking at the technical side of your images: shutter speed, aperture, ISO, focus, camera shake. We'll talk about your exposure, I'll talk about light, and what you're communicating with your image. These first three images that we have by, let's see, Kassandra, by Kris, and by Zixin, I think are the strongest images, the best examples that we have of showing this idea of an intimate portrait. So we'll go over these three first and talk about why they're so successful. So this first image by Kassandra, she's at ISO 500, so she's keeping the ISO relatively low. We're definitely not seeing any digital noise or any artifacts from a high ISO. She's at 24 millimeters, f5 at 1/8 of a second. 1/8 of a second, some of you used 1/8 of a second or slower or a little bit faster, and we see camera shake. But she's set up either on a tripod or maybe she's really hunkered down with her elbows on the table. So this is a really clear image. There's no movement from her grandmother and there's no movement from her holding the camera. The exposure is right on here. The exposure gives a good representation of our skin tone. We see the wall in the background is bright white, and that might throw off the meter a little bit, but she has a good exposure on her grandma. The light that's coming in looks like window light. We can see a little bit of the reflection in the glasses and a little catch light in her eyes. And this is just a nice soft light that's coming across her. You see the shadow in the background. You see how the light illuminates part of her face, kind of falls off on the other side. So she's wanting to show this sweet, soft relationship where her grandma's telling her stories on a Sunday morning. This is a good representation of the type of light you would want to use for that, right? We don't want hard light that makes it all dramatic on a Sunday morning. This is a nice, soft light. So when you guys are looking at light, think not only of how pleasing the light is on your subject, but also what is that light communicating about your subject? And then what is she communicating? Well, she has her grandma really looking straight at her. We can see that they're at the table together. And then the element that really makes this personal is this idea of this cup in the foreground, that she's sitting here with her coffee talking with her grandma. And that gives us a sense of place in the frame because we have something right in front of us. And it gives us an understanding of the relationship that's happening here, this nice, quiet morning. So this is a great example of what we're looking for here. This image is by Kris. He's at IS 640 at 22 millimeters, so really wide angle lens, f2.8. You can see that shallow depth of field there at 1/1000th of a second, so a really fast shutter speed. Now you guys hopefully saw that he shot with a neutral density filter. If you guys aren't familiar with a neutral density filter, what that does is it allows you to shoot at a brighter time of the day, but it makes the image darker. So I'm not sure what neutral density filter he used. It could be anywhere from half a stop to 10 stops or 20 stops of light. And normally we would use that to have a longer exposure and have like the water shown as smooth. He's not doing that here. Actually, I'm not exactly sure why he used a neutral density filter in this situation. Sometimes we'll have neutral density filters that are cut. So the top of the image would be darker and then the bottom of it would be lighter, and that would allow you to hold on to the details of the sky here. But if you're shooting the whole thing with a neutral density filter and you're not using it to have a longer exposure, I'm not quite positive what the reasoning was behind it. Maybe you know something about it that I don't, Kris, so I'd love to hear more about that. All right, so all the settings look good. The image is really sharp, right? It's a perfectly sharp image. And if we look at what he's using for a lens, it looks like he's using a 14 to 24 millimeter lens. So this looks like a really nice lens. And as you guys will photograph, you'll notice that some lenses, oftentimes the kit lenses that come with your lens, are these plastic zoom lenses that don't really have the sharpness that you'll notice with more expensive lenses and oftentimes with fixed focal length lenses. So this is a nice sharp image. The light that he's using, he's photographing this late in the evening, it looks like, at 6:30. Actually, it's not that late. 6:30 in the evening, but with all of our smoke, this appears to be sunset. The light on the water appears to be golden, so it's a really beautiful quality of light. He's low, which I think adds that sense of intimacy to this image. In general, I wouldn't think this represents an intimate portrait, but I think that point of view getting lower makes us as the viewer feel a little bit more vulnerable. And as we're looking up at him, he's coming towards us, and it creates this like feeling of trust that we have towards the subject. You also get this if you're the photographer and you're shooting down at someone. It makes the person that's below you seem like they're trusting you. I don't think anyone in this class took that approach, but in my other class, some students did that, my other people photography class. And you can kind of go back and forth with the different roles of the photographer and the subject. And here, by just being a little bit lower, it has more of an intimate feel. As we look at your picture, Kris, we can see that you have a dirty image sensor. So that's something that I would like you to get fixed. This is a beautiful image. We don't want to have any of that. Hopefully it's just on the lens, but I'm afraid that that's on the image sensor. So you'll want to clean that off. But overall, really beautiful image, nice and sharp, beautiful light. We can tell he's done some post-production. And actually the line around his arms looks a little bit too, I don't know, that edge looks a little bit too sharp and like you did a little bit of post-processing, especially around the hand there. So be aware of that, but overall, really beautiful image here. And then this image is by Zixin. I'm not sure if I'm saying your name right. Obviously, I didn't say it right one of those times. So if you could let me know how to say your name, that would be really helpful. Now, I think this is a really fun image. It's an image that's really easy to overlook and to pass by it and not think that there's much being shown here. But as you look more into the details of the image, it seems that everything is really intentional here. So he's at ISO 320, 18 millimeters gives us a really wide angle view lens. So we're able to see the treadmill as well as the dresser and everything in between, right? There's a lot of detail back there. F9 lets us see good detail as we move through the image, and 1/160th of a second is fast enough that he should be able to handhold. Now, the exposure here looks good on the subject. You can probably see that some areas get a little bit of dark back here as the light falls off, but the subject has good exposure on them. The light that's coming in looks like it's just light that's ambient light that was set up there. It doesn't appear like you have window light or anything like that. So there's a bit of a harshness to the light as it's coming across. You can see the shadows down here, the shadows like right behind his head there. So we can tell this has a little bit of a harshness to it. But the relationship between the subject and the camera is just like unbeatable here. As you're photographing maybe your father as he's sitting in his recliner, shoes on the ground, and he's telling you to get out of the way, it looks like, of the TV as the remotes are right next to him. Just this really personal interaction that if you had someone else that wasn't in a relationship with this person, taking this wouldn't be what you got. You would get him just sitting on the couch. So this gesture that he's making to move, I think, makes this whole image so interesting. And then if we move around, all of the details that we can see, like looking at the plastic on the bottom of where the footrest is, the plastic on the treadmill back here, the details of everything that's on the shelf, all the remotes that are laid out, and then it looks like, I don't know, like a book or something next to it. Like all of these little details, the jacket that you would put on right as you walk out this door, make it very personable and really homey. And I'm really drawn to this image. I think it has a great communication of the intimate portrait.